Hi everyone, it's Michael, and I am so excited I can hardly contain myself, and God knows I've needed a reason to feel excited and happy lately, but I am filming the bloom profile for number 11 in my collection, my Psychopsis Mendenhall Hildos. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on lead-in before showing you this gorgeous, gorgeous bloom, but let's just take a look together. Oh my, it's out of this world. It is so stunning, it is so captivating, and it came about so unexpectedly, but just look at this stunning little beauty. Now, this is often called the butterfly orchid and or the samurai orchid, and we'll get into why a little bit later, but absolutely stunning across the board. And I'm not just talking about this gorgeous flower. Look at this vegetative growth. Look at the leaves. Absolutely gorgeous. A little background and history on this beauty. Psychopsis orchids grow native to Trinidad, Central and South America. The Psychopsis Mendenhall Hildos specifically is a cross between the Psychopsis butterfly and the Psychopsis papilio. Now, I purchased this orchid in May of 2017 on a trip to an orchid nursery with my mom. It was very early in my orchid growing journey, and when I picked this one, my mom was kind of like, I don't know, honey, you might want to pick something a little bit more simple. Why don't you try a nice Phalaenopsis? But I was insistent. I really wanted this plant. And I gotta say, I'm surprised it has made it as far as it has. Again, this is number 11 in my collection. I put this through a lot of mistreatment. I definitely did not give it what it wanted for a very long time. So I'm just so thrilled to see it in bloom now. Now, in terms of this plant's adaptation to semi-hydroponics, it did take a solid 4 to 5 months before it really acclimated to the growing method. But I don't think that has anything to do with the grow method itself. I think it had everything to do with the fact that I was doing a lot of other stupid things with this plant when I first got it. For example, I was doing monthly treatments of Physan to ensure that there was no algae growth in the containers. Now, I've said this many times before. I will link the more detailed video about this concept below, but I just don't think algae is a problem. In fact, if you look at this container now, you can see it is positively covered in algae, and the plant is doing phenomenally well. Now, I do want to take some time to talk about the things I tried that did not work for this plant. And independent of those Physan treatments, it all revolves around light. Now, the general advice for this plant is bright light that has some dappled shade. Now, as I mentioned many times before, I really wanted to take these plants to their extremes and see what's the least amount of light they could grow with, what's the highest amount of light they could grow with. So this plant has really seen it all. I did bright indirect shade, I did a eastern facing exposure, I did a western facing exposure, I also did northwestern facing exposure. This plant is really, really interesting to the extent that the leaves tell you precisely what they need. If you look at the leaves right now, look how vivid they are. When I placed it in insufficient light level areas, the mottling almost vanished. It became very, very pale. It almost turned exclusively green with just the hint of some mottling. So this plant tells you really clearly when it's feeling vibrant and healthy, and it tells you when it needs a little bit more energy. And then now that I have it under the LED grow light, it is super, super vivid. So the great thing about Psychopsis, or at least the Psychopsis Mendenhall Hildos, is it gives you a bit of a cheat sheet with exactly what it needs. Now, in regard to the timeline, the flower spike on this appeared January 20th, but it did not bloom until April 3rd. So it did take just over 2 months to really develop. So it takes a little bit longer than other orchids, but it is well worth the wait. Now, you've been patient enough. Let's go in for a closer look.
I was so excited as this orchid was getting ready to bloom that I actually decided to take some videos of it immediately prior to opening. And just look at this strange little alien pod. It is absolutely stunning and oddly compact for how large this bloom is. In regard to the development of the flower spikes appear at the base of a newly matured pseudobulb. As you follow the flower spike up, you'll notice two things. One, that it has the same mottling as the leaves, and it is beautifully speckled. And two, that as you approach the flower spike itself, the stem flattens out. In regard to coloration, this bloom is an absolute stunner. The lateral sepals and the lip share this gorgeous shade of Tweety Bird yellow, which is bordered by a shade of red-brown or maybe even burnt sienna. The dorsal sepals are a shade of yellow-green, punctuated with hints of brown. Now, if you look at the shape of the orchid, you can understand why it's called the Samurai Orchid. It appears to be a samurai warrior holding 3 swords. The foliage is also stunning, which is a shade of forest green punctuated by vivid shades of maroon. This is also quite a sizable display, with blooms being anywhere between 2 to 3 inches wide and 5 inches tall. If you look closely, you'll notice some charming little whiskers on the column of each bloom. And in my mind, this is an adorable little mustache for each of the samurai warriors. One of the most fascinating attributes of Psychopsis orchids is that they are sequential bloomers. So if you look behind the bloom, you'll see another flower bud developing. So when the current bloom drops, this one will develop and take its place. This process can go on indefinitely.
Now, in regard to fragrance, this guy, it has no discernible fragrance whatsoever. And I always talk about that kind of faint floral that exists on other non-fragrant orchids. This one doesn't even have that. This one is truly not a fragrant orchid whatsoever. Now, the last thing I want to discuss with this beauty is the length of bloom. And it's a bit of a unique character in this way because it is, as I mentioned, a sequential bloomer. It already has its next flower bud on the way. Now, it's interesting because I've read so many different perspectives on this. I have heard that these will stay in bloom for anywhere up to 7 years, up to 12 years, and even up to 20 years. So who knows how long this will actually stay in bloom, assuming you give it the proper care. Now, ordinarily what I do is in the notes section, or not the notes section, but in the description of each video, I list the bloom duration. I can't do that because this is going to drop blooms and rebloom over and over and over. So just know that the general duration of each bloom is roughly 1 month or up to 1 month. But what I am going to track is how long this flower spike continues to produce buds. So it started again on April 3rd, and I will update the description of this video if and when the flower spike dies. But hopefully I just never update it and it just blooms for me for 20 years. Wouldn't that be the best? And with that, that's pretty much it. You know, I have to say that in this very stressful time of in-place shelter, self-quarantine, existing in the echo chambers of our minds, it's been so lovely and so wonderful to be able to enjoy these gorgeous blooms. It has been incredibly energizing. It has been so inspiring for me, and it really gets me through this challenging time. So I'm so grateful for these flowers. I'm so grateful to be able to share them with you. And I hope everyone is staying happy, healthy, and very safe. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with me. If you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, go ahead and leave them in the comment section below. Be sure to support one another in the comment section because I am so seldom available to do so. Don't forget to click subscribe and have a beautiful rest of your day. Mwah! Bye, guys.